MFA 661, and I just turn off myself. So, all right, everybody. First, I want to talk about once again your discussions. How just in 2 short weeks, I'm seeing such support and empathy, and really some deep responses to what each of you is writing, and that just makes me so pleased. And if you've got, some of you I know have already read next week's discussions about a life worth ending, and that's when I found out about what I just mentioned to Carolyn about writing about the tragic death of her dad, and the injuries to her mom, and then how that's affected her own life. I just wanted to acknowledge right here that I know that each of us brings these different experiences to this writing group. Nobody reaches our place in life without having some really hard things happen to us, and nobody needs to feel forced to write about anything until they're ready. But just know that if you feel like you're ready, this is where I think your writing and your life story can be heard. So I'm actually going to start with what I said in my my preview of the Hangout that I was going to end with, but I wanted to be sure I got to it because it seems to touch on so many of the things we're going to be doing during this course. That's what I call the 3 C's that I believe every creative writer, whether you're a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer, the 3 C's I think is essential to every writer. None of these can be taught. They can be nurtured. They can be brought out. They can be encouraged. And as I mentioned too in my announcement, one of the C's is not creativity. So what do you think they might be?
Courage.
Start there. That is correct. Why? Why do you think that as a person who's been doing this for a long time and has edited so many other writers, why would I put courage as one of the, I think, really essential, innate qualities of a writer? Bethany, what do you think?
It's hard to be honest. Like that. To dig through the depths of your own human experience and allow other people to read it and to see into that part of your life. It takes a lot of courage.
Of course. And Nicole?
Yeah, I think similarly, and also thinking about your conversation that you had that I then watched, just about the fear that can accompany this process and putting yourself out there for critique, I guess. I think it takes courage to go to hard places, and a lot of us write about some of those hard places.
Heidi?
Yeah, I guess the courage comes from being sort of exposing yourself, allowing yourself, as Judith wrote for this week, being vulnerable, kind of a, I think that it's some of the really hard things that I've written about, and there's one really hard thing I wrote about this last year that took 3 years for me to even try to write about it. It brought it all back up, and it makes you go deep and relive some of this stuff if you're writing about the past, and usually the present leads to the past, I find. So yeah, that.
Let me ask you, how did you know if 2 years or 3 years had passed? How did you know from the first day when you said, now I'd like to do this? What changed?
Well, it was actually writing about something that happened 16 or 17 years ago, and I think about 3 years ago it sort of gelled for me that I had been pushing this experience into a little box, and it was kind of not doing me, it didn't make it go away, it was still there. And so I thought that one thing I could do is write about it, and but then I just couldn't. And I mean, I finally did when I was on a writer's retreat last spring of all women, and I felt very safe and supportive. I thought, well, if no one else sees this, these women here, if I finish this today and read it, they'll hear this story, and that will be important to me, and that would probably be healing. And I trusted the women, and that it was going to all stay in that room, and I wrote it, and I sat with it for 6 or 7 months. It's currently out on submission for a rape journal, or a rape book journal, edited by Roxanne Gay. I feel sort of like I don't know whether I want it to be out there or not, so I'm sort of indifferent. But it took a long time. It was a long time coming, and if I think about it now, and I think about it even being out there, sometimes makes my stomach churn. So.
Understand that. Judith, you've seen a lot in your life. What does courage mean to you as a writer?
Means putting yourself in a position where you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and that takes courage. You could, it can bring up the past, or you could be positioning yourself for ridicule and defamation and all kinds of things. It takes courage to step out there and share your ideas. You have to have a lot of self-confidence in yourself and in your writing in order to step out that door.
Well said. And Carolyn, don't want to leave you out of this discussion.
Oh, no, I wanted to actually just say that I really liked how Judith went to the core of the word courage and looked up the Latin meaning for core, which is heart, and I think that kind of gets to the meaning of it, that it requires a lot of heart. It is bravery, and I think a lot of writing out of courage can be catharsis too. So
we'll be touching on courage again next week in the Hangout, because that was one of the core of the questions in the discussion on Michael Wolff's story. But now there's 2 other C's. What do you think they are? And one of them is not creativity.
Character?
Character's good. It's not one of the 3.
Oh.
I'm talking about some innate part of the writer that I believe cannot be taught, but hopefully can be nurtured.
Compassion?
Compassion. All right, you get 10 points.
All right.
Now, explain in your words what compassion means to you as a writer.
We touched on this in one of my 3 courses last semester, and it was kind of a revelation to me. Sometimes when you're writing about hard things and you're telling a story, it's not just your story. If there's other characters, and they might be hard stories about a divorce or someone who's wronged you or something like that, and there's a way of developing your character in such a way that you demonstrate compassion despite sorry about that. Despite maybe the feelings that you've had and the hurt, and I just thought the idea of showing compassion for your characters and sort of holding them and the story in such a way that you tell it honestly. But I don't know, I was really struck by that, that if you can write from a place of compassion, you will do justice by, everyone who is involved in the story, even those people who might have caused you some pain.
Nicely put. Bethany, in your words, what would compassion mean to you as a writer in your own life?
Well, I agree with Nicole about having to obviously have compassion for the people and the characters you write about, even if they may have not done right by you. I think it's also having compassion for yourself.
There you go. Good for you.
As a writer, it's hard. You have to be easy and gentle with yourself.
Very good. Both of those go together. Sometimes every writer has to let themselves off the hook. And it's so easy to get discouraged in this work, and that what you're undertaking is hard. Even if you're writing a light, humorous piece, those words put in exactly the order that you're about to put them in to an audience has never actually been done that way before, exactly the way that you're going to do it, because your life is so unique, and you have to give yourself some breathing room and have compassion for yourself in that process. Carolyn, how do you relate to that word?
I don't know. When I think of compassion, I do think of taking, I guess, feelings into account. So, and Bethany's right that you do have to have compassion for yourself, and you can't, obviously let your inner critic get to you. But compassion for the work itself, I think, is really important. You really have to care about what you're writing about. Otherwise, it's just not going to come off as authentic. So I think that is part of it, is being compassionate about the subject, whatever it may be, whether it's another person or just a broader topic that you're writing about. I think you do have to be compassionate about that, and do your best to do your research, to do it justice.
Well said, all of you. And Judith, how does it relate to you?
Having empathy for both yourself and the other person, and understanding of yourself and the other person, and being non-judgmental in your approach to the other person.
Okay, very good. And Heidi, in lieu of what you just told us about the subject of one of the things that took you so long to write about,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see compassion with your own writing life?
Well, in light of that piece, I still sort of wonder, because it could be. I tried to really not name names, not make the place very identifiable. Somebody really wanted to figure this out from my past, they might be able to. And my compassion had to do with this particular man's daughters, not necessarily with him himself, who is now a super attorney in Minnesota and a professor at one of the law schools in town. And so I just, I guess compassion had to do with the broader family, and I guess also the approach, I would say, because in any situation, there is two sides to every story, and compassion maybe means that you always try to consider that, and is a better story for it too, to try to understand the characters around you, so that you don't just create this really one-sided character that you haven't. And maybe I needed to get to that point where I could sort of see how I fit in this piece, and not. It's a light touch. I really try. There's a lot of perhapsing in this piece. Perhaps he thought this. Perhaps he did that. So I guess the compassion is in really writing about something when you feel like you're able to look at it from all sides, and not always make assumptions, I guess.
Yeah. These are all these are all really good responses. In the Lives essay, there's one especially compassionate moment, I believe, is when she is showing us her boyfriend Borden, when he just can't take it, and she sees him weeping, I believe it's a staircase or in a hallway, and he doesn't know that she's seeing him. I thought that was written with great compassion for what her suffering had done to him. There's one other C that I know that each of you possesses this in your very being, or you wouldn't even be in this program. It's something that sometimes the school system kind of dilutes in us, and you come into this earth filled with this, and you have to fight hard to retain it. What do you think this last C is?
Conviction?
Conviction's that's a good one, but it's not the one, but it's a good one. I can actually, if I did 4 C's, conviction could be very good, because without conviction you would maybe write kind of weak and slippery stuff. That's a good one. That's not wrong.
Collaboration.
Collaboration, good. This is like I'm the quiz master, and I'm possessing the key to the word that I want.
So that's wrong.
That's not wrong. They're all good. I'm just looking for another one. I'll give you a hint. You come into this world filled with this. That's what leads what?
Credibility?
Well, yes. Not but yes, but it's yes. It's what leads to bruised elbows and skinned knees and and dirt under your fingernails as a little kid, and probably scoldings by teachers when you're looking at them.
Curiosity.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's a point. So there's no way that you would have even entertained wanting to write your tales. I mean, Nicole, the first time I met her on paper was when she was talking about her hairdresser and the stories she tells and the interest she has in it. So I'll start with you, Carolyn. The word curiosity to you, what does it mean to you as a writer?
Well, curiosity to me is just, I mean, like you said, it's just kind of an open path set out in front of us, and whether we go out and discover is what makes us curious. So we're always, basically looking for answers in whatever we do. And so I think that writing is a process, and so when you do write, you're looking for something within your writing. You're looking for a resolution. You're looking for the end. You're looking for an adventure. I mean, I think that's just what the curiosity part of being a writer is. You can just start writing, and you're just curious as to how it's going to end up.
Very good, Judith. For you, what does the word curiosity mean to you in your writing life?
Asking questions, asking the who, what, when, where, why type questions. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Kind of questioning.
Okay. And Nicole, in terms of your interest with your hairdresser, tell us about how curiosity plays a part in that.
I feel like you might all be judging my hairstyle right now. It's funny because I told that story in my introduction because there was just this funny collection of events that happened just before I decided to sign on to this program, and it just happened to be a glass of wine on my hairdresser's porch and reminiscing about this conversation we've been having over more than 20 years now about the amazing stories that she hears. And then my partner said, "Oh, Nicole, you're a great writer. You should write her stories." And then, there are other parts of that story. But anyway, I'm quite curious about what she hears. I think we all know when we're sitting in that chair how comfortable we are. At least I'll speak for myself. I just say she knows more about me and my adult life than anybody else in my life. And so, but it hadn't occurred to me that everybody else does that too. So she's been a hairdresser for, I don't know, over 30 years, and lots of people have sat in that seat. So I'm incredibly curious about her stories. I'm interested in helping her tell them. I'm curious about, what those stories, how those stories might resonate for so many people. And then just the juxtaposition of the chair and the mirror, and what that all says about how comfortable we are or not in telling people our stories. So I think there's a lot there. I have not even begun it. I haven't really thought about it. None of my writing so far has been about that. So my curiosity sort of lingers there.
I'll give you one little writing tip is that when you start this project and when you start talking to her,
yeah,
she probably has 30 years of stories.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of silences. Because what I have found time and time again, that if I just let the silences come in and don't try to force more words, whomever I'm talking with, that interviewing, they will fill that silence within a very short time, and they will tell you, they would actually go deeper than what you would have gotten if you had just kept asking them another question. Mm-hmm. Bethany, curiosity and the Bethany writer.
I guess you have to have a curiosity about your subject matter, whether it's a person or somebody else's story or even your own. There has to be some part of it that picks at you a little bit that you want out. And for most writers, I think the only way we find out that more, especially if they're personal stories, is to write about them.
Okay. I'm guessing that most of you, if not all of you, the writing that you're doing in your classes, I'm going to guess a lot of it's like personal memoir type essay as part. I don't know if you're doing any of the what I call the nonfiction writing that first starts with reporting or not. But you'll find that if you do enter into that kind of writing, that it's one of the most fun parts of this whole thing that we do is just finding out stuff that you never had any idea about. You just kind of enter. And every writer has a different approach. Tom Junod, who you will read at least one of his stories this semester, he has a whole boatload of National Magazine Awards. He feels that he wants to go into a story having done hardly any prior research. He wants to learn everything as if it's being presented on a blank screen. Other writers, myself included, I love researching this stuff. So if I was doing a story on a firefighter who survived like that incredible fire in Worcester some years ago that killed some fire, I want to have read about that event so I know I can ask something pertinent and detailed that shows him that I've done my homework and so on. Everyone has a different thing, but finding out this stuff is one of the great perks of doing this work, because most people go through lives and they don't actually take the time to go deeply into other professions or other events or other ways of life. Heidi, the word curiosity for you.
I think about I have a 6-year-old, very curious, wants to know the why of everything, wants to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think in writing, I find that you can stop at a certain level, or you can give it time and peel back and go further. And for me, like a real fascination with me is what motivates people, intentions and interpersonal relationships really fascinate me, the whys of those things, and just reading about trying to always understand more and more about how we all work, how our emotions work, whether our thoughts really do create some certain force within us, and so I think it's just being open, really being open-minded always, and knowing that we may never know it all. That can be frustrating, but also being really open to, if you're interviewing somebody, or that you really listen to what they have to say.
Stop right there. Why? What does that mean? The listening part. When you say really listen to what they have to say, that's easy to say, but how does that actually show up in the writing life?
Well, I think so often we're not empathetic listeners. Even if we're talking to someone, we might just be sitting there, like you're interviewing somebody, you might be busy thinking about your next question. Yeah, I used to do that. I was probably not a very good attorney. Depositions, I never got to the comfort level. So instead of really listening, and there's a court reporter there, but instead of really listening, I would be trying to formulate my next question. And I think in writing, you have to drop your own internal storyline. Even if you're not interviewing anybody else, you're listening to maybe what this page is saying to you, or what the story is saying to you, or what your characters are saying to you.
Okay. You know, I taught reporting and writing to a magazine class for many years at UMass, and this whole listening thing was actually an entire class. And I always would say to them at the start, when's the last time somebody really listened to you, totally listened to you? And these are 21, 20, 19, 22-year-old students, and it would be amazing how most of them would go, huh, I can't even remember the last time somebody really listens. And I don't mean like while you're checking your phone or while you're doing this, but I mean looking at you and just listening. And I think, Nicole, again, I think it's going to be quite an adventure, because I'm guessing your hairdresser has done a lot of talking and a lot of listening.
A lot of listening, yeah.
Maybe she hasn't actually had somebody just pay that kind of attention, and it's going to be probably very different for her as well. So sudden illness. I'm going to make a transition to a sudden illness. This was written, I believe, in 2000, maybe 2001. It's one of my favorite personal essays, and it's not because of what happened to Laura Hillenbrand or that she became a literary phenomena. It's because of her language, and that's what I wanted to talk about tonight a little bit, is how her language brings the reader inside her experience, because I imagine very few readers knew her at the time. Very few, I mean, they may have known her from Seabiscuit, yes, but they didn't know her story. They didn't know her backstory. And it's not surprising that she went on to write Unbroken, because if you think about Seabiscuit, was a horse that nobody believed in, and her jockey was a down and out jockey. Unbroken was about a man who really should not have survived his ordeal, either on the raft that he, from the plane crash, and then from the excruciating tortures experiences in the prison camp, and so on. She's drawn to the underdogs, drawn to the improbable survival. So she had this story to tell, very personal story to tell, but she had to use language to do it. And the reason I wanted you to look at the verbs is because I know that we've all, from 4th grade on, we probably had to either diagram sentences or pay attention to grammar. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the verbs that kind of excite you when you read. And I'll start with you, Nicole. The verbs that caught your eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were many. There were hardly any that didn't sort of catch my eye, but I think I wrote out that entire paragraph. I'm looking for it right now in the essay.
Cicadas, right?
Yeah, about the cicadas. I was just amazing. It was
that
just,
year, millions of cicadas boiled up from the ground, teemed over the tree limbs and carpeted lawns and roads. That one.
Yeah, that one. And it just was. And then we got in a bit of an online dialogue about sort of what the point of that was. You know, it seems so out of place. Why did she have to go there and make that particular paragraph and that particular scene, if you will, so vivid in the ways that she did? And I think, Mel, you and I both kind of replied thinking that this was kind of her world. She's just stuck in bed, and it seems to me that everything was kind of still, and then so the sounds of the cicadas just were probably booming in her head and in ways that could be kind of crazy making. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
And Judith, some of the verbs that you chose: radiated heat, rattled with chills.
Yes.
Let's just take rattled with chills.
Great. That caught my eye.
What caught your eye about it?
Well, we've probably all experienced chills before, but rattled with chills, I don't think I had ever heard of that. And I had to think about it, and then I thought of my body be rattling with the chills, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. I like that. Mm-hmm. While we're on Laura Hillenbrand, before I forget, I read something about her somewhere. When she wrote Unbroken, she attributed her success to being, as Heidi would have suggested, able to listen. She listened to the man for hours and hours and hours. Didn't say a thing, just listened. Sorry, I had to get that.
Sorry, no, I love it when we make little segues into something we've just talked about. Heidi, I'm going to pick out just one of yours, which is such an unusual piece of language. The furniture flexed and skidded across the room, around the room, sorry. So what caught your eye about that?
Well, you know, if this isn't like a horror story like The Exorcist or something, then you know that you can get a sense from those verbs how very, very sick she was. You're on this, without ever saying, wow, I was just so nauseous, or so dizzy, beyond belief, dizzy. You know, she just says this thing about what's happening around her, and we get inside her body with those verbs, and we perceive what's happening around her. We're seeing things from within her and looking out that vantage point, and I think that that's what at many points throughout this piece, it's that's the brilliance, that she just gets us right into her place. We're not sitting there looking at her, we're within her world looking out.
Nicely put. And Carolyn, I want you to talk about one of the verbs that you chose. I'm going to say it without this vivid verb. I'm going to say, I became delirious, which is a very common way to put it. I had high fever, I became delirious. But you chose, I slid into delirium, and the verb slid. What caught your eye about that? Why does that work for you?
Because of the fact that basically, like you said, you don't become delirious. You have to, like she says, you have to slide into delirium, and the person who is delirious doesn't necessarily know what's happening. So I think that is the perfect verb to use, because she's sliding into delirium, and there's no way for her to kind of like bring herself out of it. So I mean, sliding is basically kind of something where you have no control over it, and I thought that was just really a good use of a word.
Really well put. Now, Bethany, let's say you're writing about waiting for the doctor to come in, and a lot of writers might say a few minutes later the doctor came in, but you chose a different way that Laura Hillenbrand described this scene. A few minutes later the doctor bounded in. So what caught your eye about that simple word of bounded in? What picture did that form in your mind?
It actually made me think of like a little puppy, like coming really excited into the room, and this woman is so deathly ill and has been fighting to find answers for months upon months, and it just seems so inappropriate to me. Like, even if she had found out what was wrong with her and had the world's perfect cure, like, there should have been some sort of like seriousness in that moment, rather than this, golden retriever leaping into the room and waving test results in her face.
Right. So Bethany, just know, the end of the class tonight, I'm going to write Mary Weissman, who's the guru of the of this program and the technical. I'm going to tell her that you seem to break up a little bit, so it's hard to understand you, which is through no fault of your own. And I'm going to suggest that because this happened last semester, and she did a little Google Hangout with one of the students, just the two of them, and she figured out a way that you could eliminate that. Okay?
Okay.
Because it's and then so the verbs, and what I don't want to have happen with any writer is it trying to emulate Laura Hillenbrand's verbs then freezes you up and you think, I can't do that. So what I want you to think of is most of the things that we're going to be talking about in terms of craft is to make you aware of it. Just write your stories, let your stories out. This is all really basically for your rewrite process to pay. These are the things that you pay attention to. There's no way that Laura Hillenbrand wrote this story out cold and it was done in a sitting. This was a deeply rewritten story where every scene she would go back and she would be thinking, how can I make this more vivid? And that's where those words happen. It happens in the rewrite process, and it happens in your head. And I'm echoing as well right now again. All right, I want to talk about this use of concrete detail. She does not just say that she grew disoriented. She writes, words from different parts of the page appeared to be grouped together in bizarre sentences. I'm trying to wait for my echo. I'm gonna move my thing. Sorry, guys. And then she gives us this detail. She talks about the bizarre sentences. Then she says, endangered condors charged in shotgun killing. So she actually let you, she didn't just give you the overview, she actually gave you that detail. And this use of concrete details is often the difference. Are you hearing the echo like I'm hearing it?
Yes.
Stop it. All right, sorry. It's the use of concrete detail that most often makes a difference between a story really being riveting and making you feel like you are inside this tale and that you're just outside reading the back. I'm taking a timeout. Does that help? Okay. Try this again. So what does concrete detail say to you, Heidi? When you have a writer, a teacher talking about concrete detail, do you have a problem, or are you aware of the detail that matters, the detail that may be extraneous? That's maybe the most important element.
Well, I think that it's a developing area for me. I do try to ask myself when I'm putting in detail, and I maybe don't do it on the first write because I don't ask myself that many questions. I'm not going to. But I will say, well, does this detail further the narrative? And that's one of the first cuts. You know, if it really doesn't further the narrative, then do I have some other reason for it being there? I mean, maybe it does not matter that my sweater is blue necessarily, but you also want to give enough details that the reader feels connected with the story and the place. So I guess I'm always sort of asking myself, especially when I go through and try to cut stuff, does this really need to be there? And I get kind of brutal with myself in cutting. But I don't do it when I'm initially writing. I mostly let it all be there.
Nicole, in the writing that you do you struggle at all with this detail is important, this detail I can leave out, and how do you tell the difference?
Yeah, quite a bit. Especially in my experience in this program so far with word limits. That's been a really interesting challenge that I kind of resented in the beginning, but I've come to appreciate. But it's challenged this very notion of trying to figure out. You know, I write something back from classmates saying, "Oh, I really think you need to flesh this out. I think this is an important detail," and I think, oh, okay, but you know, under this word limit, you know, what am I going to cut? So that's been in part the value of the feedback that I've gotten. That what I think is important may not necessarily resonate with the reader. So that's definitely good.
Right. That's a starting point, is what you think is important. And then that's where sometimes having a group of people to read that to see if it actually resonates with them as well. But the reason that I think most like myself, why I give these assignments to be so compressed, is to force you to actually say, what is the essence of this? And that's why the lives essays are one of the main reasons I give those to people to read and to try to emulate, is they only get 700 words maximum to capture some event or some person that, or some experience that probably made such an impact on their lives, oftentimes changing their lives. Judith?
Now, can it be 800 words? That's what the syllabus says. So I was just.
Yeah, no. Of course. Remember, I think I've said many times that I don't. So I have to find out. So both Bethany, both of us are going to be having some session with Mary Weissman. Last week, I don't think I was echoing last week. So
I think we're all echoing.
What happens if you go out and come back in? Totally, all of us.
well, we did it last week, so I'll do it right now. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to invite you right back, okay? Bye, guys. Be right back.